Hey guys, welcome back. My name is Octavia and this is my astrology podcast. Thanks for being here. I hope you're having a great week. I'm excited to delve into the astrology that's happening leading up into the month of March as we wind up February rather quickly. So because there's so much astrology happening during this lead up to the beginning of March and the first week of March, I'm splitting up this into a two-part segment. So this episode is going to be more about the personal level and how these influences may be coming up in our own personal realms. And I'm going to be describing the influence and effect of Mercury leaving shadow and squaring Uranus this week, and how that is going to lead into the sort of new chapter that we're starting next week, leading up to the new moon, which is going to happen on March 2nd. So the second video is going to be more around the new moon itself, and also the other component of this. The reason I'm separating it into two segments is that I want to talk about all of these things within the context of the US Pluto return. So, and the reason being that on the new moon on March 2nd, the planets, so Venus is going to be leaving shadow and she's going to conjoin Mars and Pluto, or they're all going to conjoin right around the new moon, right on the US's natal Pluto point. So I think that this is a really important thing to bring in to these episodes, but in order to keep it from being one giant Jupiter-sized transmission, which this almost turned into that, and then I opted to separate it so that you could have the option. This part one being about the influences leading up to the new moon, and then what that can actually, how that might land for you, and what to expect, and how to actually harness the big supportive stuff that we're getting from the planets right now, and how we can work with it. And I'm also today, because the astrology is really magnificent to look at, I've been delving into doing more visual components on the video end of things. So if that's something that calls to you, if you're listening on the podcast, that's of course fine. You can continue doing that. It's just here as a supplemental option for you. Like if you like to look at the various visual components along with the information, it's here on YouTube. So this sextile, this 60-degree aspect with Uranus in Taurus that connects, again, Jupiter, and then with Neptune connecting with Venus and Mars. This is what I'm going to talk about more in this episode in a very tangible, real life kind of way. Basically what that means is that we have this, it's almost like a wash cycle or like a assembly line, if you will, where there's a lot of things in life right now that are getting broken down, and then they're getting sifted, processed, put through various organizational things, getting reintegrated and repurposed in our lives. And this is on every level. So we've got, because it's Neptune, and Neptune is the higher octave of Venus, this is helping us to understand how to recreate how we connect and relate and dream, in fact, and reimagine the reality that we want in front of us. Based on everything that's coming in, that's no longer working, that's no longer tenable. We're actually having to, in a very real way, process those things and then reimagine and recreate from that place. And the moon moving through Pisces, and in fact having the new moon in Pisces next week on Wednesday the 2nd. And I think it's this process of this demoing, if you will, this building, this construct, you know, and then sifting through the rubble and the materials and sorting them, sending them away to be recycled, to be reclaimed, to be whatever they need to be done with, And, you know, this is the kind of Jupiter, what Jupiter does. And Jupiter in Pisces, it's like, you know, dissolving, uh, reintegrating things that have crumbled, so that they can actually settle, and then we can start from scratch, and not from scratch so much because we have stuff still to work with, but we'll better understand how we can integrate from that place. So I'm going to dig into that a bit more. And I want to talk about as well, in regard, we can think about this demolition construction site example as a way to reframe how we understand imagination and how we can use it as adults. Because we often, you know, we often think of imagination as something that's really more for children, which children are amazing at. We all were amazing at it at one point or another. But as we get into adulthood and our consciousness and our psyches get kind of populated with other influences and other structures, our imagination can seem at times perhaps you know, an indulgence and something that we've outgrown perhaps. And I think, you know, Esther Perel actually has put out a fair amount of content during the pandemic, pointing to how important it is for us in terms of relating and as adults, of course, to harness this kind of erotic energy, this spontaneity that we've sort of lost in a sense because you know, we don't have these experiences of walking around and bumping into people we know and having conversations. And so erotic energy in that sense, like not in a more sexualized sense, but this ability that we have to create from moment to moment. And this is very much what Jupiter and Neptune, both co-rulers of Pisces, are supporting. So we can go back to this very real world example of this demolition construction site. And, you know, when any building is being either demolished or constructed, there is a vision of what it will look like in the end. And in that sense, you know, anyone out there listening to this who's ever had to create something from nothing, you have to have this ability to envision something before you can start that process of creating it. So this is a big part of the astrology right now, again, that's being supported, where a lot of things are breaking down, and we're sifting through it all. But a big component that I want to highlight today is the importance of being able to see beyond what's here in front of us. I've touched on this in the past about the sign of Capricorn, the sign of Aquarius. These are very pragmatic, you know, realistic. What's, you know, Aquarius a little less so, but Capricorn is very much about the here and now and what's here in front of us and how that's actually gonna work. And so that's all very well, but I think having that point of view, but also having this wider vision that can like sit back and see the bigger grid, see the bigger picture, that's a really important point of focus, and especially leading up to this new moon and with the planets going direct, because my sense is, particularly with this Mercury squaring Uranus, is that it's going to feel very easy to not want to let go of the struggle and not wanting to let go of like what's not working and wanting to force it, because we've had this huge loss of ability to live in various ways, in ways that we're used to living socially. And, you know, a lot of stuff has opened back up and things are kind of getting back to normal, but there's a part of us, you know, we're still processing behind the scenes, underneath the surface. Like, we're processing that loss of like the last 2 years. And I think, as Esther Perel talks about in her content, about how, she's reached out to her viewers and asked like what they're missing. And it is these everyday interactions that are just not like they were. And so I think that we are really desperate in a way, collectively, to grab a hold of something and to be able to rely on it to come through for us. But in fact, with this with this Mercury squaring Uranus, as of the 25th on the Friday, it's like, even that whole week leading up to that, it's like there's probably something that's just not landing. And it may have been the thing that you've been holding out for, that you're like, well, at least I've got that. At least I know there's that I can, trust and rely on. And it's likely been turned upside down by Uranus. And I think if we can just allow that to happen and see it as important, see it as something guiding us, and seeing the bigger picture, it's like, and asking ourselves, like, what's the goal here? What am I more attached to? Am I attached to it being the way it's always been and how I thought it would be? Or, can I actually shift that? Can I pivot in this moment where things aren't working? And can I actually use my imagination to come up with something better, to come up with a solution? And it may be right in front of you. Like, Pisces is a mutable sign. It's the last sign of the zodiac. And mutable signs deal with the transitions between seasons. Like, mutable signs are really good at working with what they've got and being like, okay, well, it's not working like this, but what if we do this and do it that way? And then, yeah, okay, cool, that can work. So sometimes it's just a matter of shuffling what's in front of you, really sitting back and looking at what you've got there. And I think that's also very important, for us to assess, because I think where we get in trouble with our imagination, and because we have, this is a two-way street. We've got Neptune, the contemporary ruler of Pisces, and Jupiter, the traditional ruler of Pisces, both in that sign. And I think if we are not deliberate about how we are imagining our lives, we can also imagine some kind of big nightmare that isn't real yet. Like, if I don't get this, then I won't have this, and then this. It's like, if this thing for work, let's say, doesn't land, then I'm not going to have any money, I'm not going to have any food, I'm going to die. We go through these things, and, that sounds a bit extreme and whatever, but we have these ideas in our head that if, like, we don't do A, B, and C, then we're not going to eat at the end of the week, or, but it's just not rational. It's like, but it's just the power of our imagination. And if we can just understand that we have it there as a tool, as something that we can actually hack, and, it's just this gift of consciousness that we have as humans. And it's very powerful. And I think just shifting back and saying, okay, I'm not going to imagine the worst case scenario. I'm not going to imagine, or if you do, you can imagine it from, Mercury's in Aquarius. It's like, we have this ability to pull back and see things from a little bit more of a detached point of view, where our emotions aren't, and depending where all this is happening in your chart, of course. But a lot of this isn't new, right? And this is what's exciting. We are about to move into new territory for the first time since before November of last year, when Venus went into shadow. So everything that's happening at the end of February, this is tying up all the loose ends. It's, taking out the trash. It's sifting everything into the skip bins at the demo site. And, you know, it's like, it's a big moment to choose as well. And the more that I delve into the astrology and look at it, practice it, and share it, like, and hear from clients and hear like what's happening in the world, I really want to emphasize like our capacity to choose our reality is real, and it's very important at moments like this, because it's almost like, you know, getting like a turbo booster put on your car and, you know, not being intentional about where you're going to take it and drive it, and just like, oh, I'm going to go to the store, I guess. But that would be a disaster. Like, you actually would need to go somewhere where you could utilize that. Otherwise, it wouldn't be that helpful. So I think, you know, when we have this huge amount of planetary support in these certain like parts of our lives, in these particular parts of ourselves and how we can move through things, it's really essential that we do it with intention. And because otherwise, you know, and I'm speaking from personal experience here, I have been very misguided many times in my life where I've just taken a wrong turn. You know, I wasn't fully paying enough attention. I went down a path that led me somewhere where one day I was like, how the hell did I end up in this? And I think that's just going to happen. We can't, you know, micromanage and dictate everything in our lives. But I think that it's important at moments like this, with this kind of astrology, to know that we can call upon ourselves to be that much more intentional at times like this, at pivotal moments such as this, so that we can actually choose how we decide to move forward, instead of being stuck in some reaction, some past sort of wheel of operating that doesn't have anything to do with what's in front of us. That's actually, because that is physiologically proven, that is how, as beings, we think we have to move through change, is in a survival state where we do call upon these old behaviors, these old patterns, things like this. So understanding that that is our nature and being kind to ourselves about that, but also being vigilant about where we're coming from as we move through these sorts of moments astrologically. If we think back to when Mercury entered shadow on December 29th of last year, this day, and I've spoken about this day back the 29th several times in previous episodes, because that was also the day that Jupiter entered Pisces, and as well Mercury conjoined Venus retrograde and Pluto at that point. So this is a moment where whatever was happening around the 29th, and it has been going on and continuing for the beginning of this year, whatever has been sort of this ongoing process that you've been in, with whatever it may be, depending on where these planets are in your chart. This is another moment where we can see this relationship of what's going on with Jupiter and what's going on with the personal planets. So in this case, now at this point, more so Mars and Venus, but we do have Mercury here leaving shadow. And leaving shadow simply means that when a planet goes retrograde, it appears to move backwards. So it goes back over the degrees on the chart that it's already moved forward into. So it basically retraces its steps, and when it leaves shadow, it actually goes beyond that point that it turned back from. So what that means is that whatever we kept having to go back and look at and address over and over, in this next week and into the beginning of March, it's full steam ahead because both Mercury, Venus are out of shadow, and every planet now is going to be direct until the month of May. So we're really going to feel just this huge momentum now, especially after having Mercury and Venus in retrograde in Capricorn for such a long time. And I'm going to be talking about the culminating point too, when Mars and Venus are actually going to leave Aquarius at the same time on the 6th. So that'll be on March 6th. It'll be for a future episode. But this is what we're moving toward, right? And everything that these two, Mars and Venus and Pluto, this is all, everything that's coming up right now is coming up because it needs to get us to that place where we can start fresh and we can actually begin a new cycle based on what we do now. Thanks again, guys. This is going to do it for this episode. I appreciate you sharing your time, energy, and attention with me here. The next episode, the next segment in this 2-part piece is going to be, it's going to pick up where I've left off. So a lot of what I've said in this episode is going to have relevance for the one that I'm going to release in the next couple of days in relation to the new moon in Pisces and just the big reset that we're going to have at the beginning of March, and all within the context of the Pluto return in the United States and how that's going to impact all of us, regardless of where you are on this planet. So thanks again for tuning in. If you want to stay connected with me, you can join my Patreon page. All the content is currently free. If you'd like to book a reading, you can find me also on Instagram. There's links in my bio, _Octavia Carney. And yeah, until next time, stay safe, well, and wise.